This week, I'm speaking with Debbie Schnur, who is a Career Pivot community member who has quite a story to tell of progressively connecting the dots to finding her happy spot. Cue the music.
Welcome to the Repurpose Your Career podcast, brought to you by Career Pivot. This podcast is where those of us in the second half of life come together to discuss how to repurpose our careers for the 21st century. Come listen to career experts give you proven strategies. Listen to people like you tell their stories on how they repurpose their careers. And finally, get your questions answered. Your host, Mark Miller, has made 6 career pivots over the last 30 years. He understands this is not about jumping out of the frying pan into a fire, but rather to create a plan where you make clear, actionable steps or pivots to a better future career. Are you ready to repurpose your career?
Welcome to episode 262 of the Repurpose Your Career podcast. My name is Mark Miller, and I'll be your host every Monday for a discussion on what it's like to repurpose your career. This week, I'm speaking with Debbie Schnur, who is a Career Pivot community member who has quite a story to tell of progressively connecting the dots to find her happy spot. Debbie left her career as a mechanical engineer in the middle part of the last decade to getting a master's degree in public health, then moving halfway across the country to making a series of pivots to become a master gardener, an expert in composting, and teaching kids about healthy foods. What I like about Debbie's story is every pivot she has made, she built her network and connected the dots to the next pivot. As she made each pivot, she did not know which dot she would need to connect to next. She just kept moving forward and, more importantly, following her heart. This is something she never did in her engineering career. However, before we get to the episode, let's have a word from our sponsor, Career Pivot. The Career Pivot membership community continues to help the members who are participating in this project grow and thrive. This is a community where everyone is there to help everyone else figure out what they want to do in the second half of life and then make it happen. Let's hear what Russ had to say about being part of the community.
At first, I got a lot out of the community, just meeting new people and finding folks in my phase of life. And that was really encouraging. As I've been in it a longer time, I'm now realizing that I have a community that knows me. And this is people who know me in a new way. And that is something that I've really come to realize that it's kind of, I don't really want to part with it because I do know that community over the last several years that I've been part of it. It's valuable in terms of support. It's also valuable in terms of accountability. And I find that, I always get questions asked to me. I also learn things. For example, the idea of pivoting to do some online appearances is an idea that came out of a career pivot. We had an evening where we talked about how to do that. I'm also teaching classes with something called Get Set Up, and a member of the Career Pivot community kind of recruited me to come teach classes with Get Set Up. So it was a good contact. I'm over 60 and heading toward the middle of that decade, and I find that we are a unique group. Some of us, like me, don't ever have plans on retiring. We just want to find work that we love for the rest of our life. I find Career Pivot has people in there like that. And, it's kind of hard to know where to find that. They're also from all over the place, which I appreciate the diversity of experiences that people bring to the community.
I'm recruiting new members for the next group. If you are interested in learning more about the endeavor, please go to careerpivot.com/community. Now, on to my discussion with Debbie Schnur. Welcome to the Repurpose Your Career podcast. I have another Career Pivot community member, Debbie Schnur, on the podcast. And she has a real interesting story to tell. So welcome to the podcast, Debbie.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be here.
We'll get started. How long have you been in the community?
I think it's coming up on 2 years.
What did you do in the first half of life?
I was a mechanical engineer for 30 years. And I didn't think, when I started, I didn't think I would be traveling this far off my career path.
So who did you work for all through those 30 years?
So mainly I worked for two employers. One was Exxon, which was now it's ExxonMobil. And I did that for 8 years. And then a friend of mine from graduate school who worked at Seagate, which makes hard disk drives, contacted me from Minnesota and asked if I would like to work there. I was thinking about going back to Minnesota. So that was a good opportunity. And I ended up working for Seagate for 17 years.
And when did that come to an end?
That came to an end at the end of 2016. And when they had a reduction in force, and it was one of many at the time, and I think there continue to be as the company gets smaller and smaller. So yes, I could have gone back, but decided not to apply for another job there.
And what'd you do after you left Seagate?
So after I left Seagate, I thought I may want to continue in engineering, just in a different area. So I looked for jobs in engineering and actually was offered one. And I did some soul searching. And I thought to myself, I don't really want to do this anymore. And I did. I actually could have gotten two different jobs. And I also decided at that point that I was ready for better weather. My daughter lives in LA, and I thought, well, maybe I could go into the high tech space in LA or San Francisco. And I started looking for jobs there. It was very difficult from long distance. So I really, after about 3 or 4 months, I really decided that was not going to work for me. So at the same time, I found out that I would be eligible for trade adjustment assistance, which is a program that helps people to get retrained after they are laid off in the manufacturing sector. And it started back in the 70s. And so once I found out that I was eligible, then that I knew that it was possible to go back to school and have that paid for by the program. So I started thinking about what could I do that I really, really wanted to do. And so, I've been interested in food for a long time, and I have kind of an interesting diet in that I'm vegetarian, mostly vegan, and I've been gluten-free for at least 15 years. And I'm also somewhat lactose intolerant. So, I try to keep the dairy to a minimum. So I've always been interested in diet and nutrition. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll go back and become a dietitian. And what I found out is if I wanted to do that, I'd probably have to do about half my undergraduate over again. And I thought, I love school, but I don't love it that much. So then I started thinking, okay, what's similar to that I could actually get into a graduate program with what I have? And I had initially majored in biomedical engineering. So I did have a lot of the hard science and organic chemistry that I would need for some of that. So I was looking around and I came across public health. And I found out that at the University of Minnesota, I was living in Minneapolis at the time, a University of Minnesota had a concentration in their public health program on nutrition and also community health and education. So I decided I was going to look into that. And I figured, well, it's right here. Why not apply? And I think I applied. I, just maybe missed the deadline by a week or so, but they held it open for me. And I ended up getting in. I ended up getting, I didn't think that I would be able to enter the program, because usually when you tell them what you want to do, usually they expect that you earn the same or more than you earned in your previous job. And I knew that wasn't going to happen in public health versus engineering. And however, the career outlook was so good for public health at the time, and this was even before the pandemic, that it was approved. My application was approved, and I was really astounded. But by that point, I thought, whether or not it's paid for or I have to pay for it myself, this is what I'm going to do. So, it was kind of a lucky coincidence that everything came together. So I ended up doing a master's in public health at the University of Minnesota. Yeah, it was great. I really enjoyed. I love going to school. I do have a PhD in mechanical engineering, and I think I stayed in school that long because that's all I knew how to do. I just kept putting it off. Is it time to go into the real world? Nah, it's not time to go into the real world. Keep going. And so, I was really, really enjoyed going back to school. It was a lot of work. I'm really energized by being with younger people. I was the oldest person in the program by a wide margin. So that was pretty interesting. But so I finished off that program and then started thinking about what I was going to do next.
So you graduated. And so what did you do next?
I thought, okay, now is my chance to head out to California, read a blog called Good Food Jobs. I saw an ad in there for Food Corps, which is, it's a grantee of AmeriCorps. And it was all about teaching kids about healthy food, working in gardens, nutrition. And I thought, this sounds perfect. And I knew that, as an AmeriCorps position, it's really considered a volunteer position. And then they give you a stipend, which is less than minimum wage. And I knew all that. But, fortunately, from my career in engineering, I had saved up enough money that I knew that I really didn't have to work at a high-powered job. So I thought, okay, I'm going to apply to Food Corps. It'll get me out to California. It'll get me into the area that I want to go into, and we'll see what happens from there. So I applied and was accepted. And I ended up being assigned to a school in the high desert. So I was this was the first year that they were doing the Food Corps program, pretty much on my own in the middle of nowhere. But it was a really great experience.
But that was just prior to the pandemic.
Yeah. So I was very, very lucky that I got there in fall of 2019. So everything was fairly normal until about March of the next year, 2020. And that's when things became a little difficult, because in that district, not a lot of people, and especially students, had access to the internet. And so it was really hard to connect with the students. But, as part of that, Food Corps was helping us to connect with videos and social media. So I learned how to make videos. I started a YouTube channel, Ms. Debbie the Garden Lady. So even though I didn't have direct contact with the kids, I was still making content for them. So I think it was still a worthwhile experience, but I was really there to have that direct contact and to work face to face. So I decided not to go for a second year at that point.
You finish up working, creating your videos. That comes to an end. What do you do next?
So, yes, it was the start of the pandemic. And I figured, well, I have this degree in public health. Maybe it would be a good time to work for a public health department. I applied for a contact tracing job and got that job almost immediately. They literally called me the next day, interviewed me. They said, you got it. And it was just a kind of a temporary job, until we weren't needed anymore. And I stayed with that for about 9 months. And the first 8 months of that, I was working the phones. So calling people who had a positive test and just giving them whatever information that they needed. And, we started out doing contact tracing, finding out, who they had been in contact with. But as the pandemic grew, it really was more of a providing information resource because there was no way to really stop the spread at that point. But I would say that job, in the beginning, there wasn't much to do because the cases were relatively low. But then, by December of that year, things were exploding. And it was just call. We had a tremendous backlog, thousands and thousands of people. And it was extremely stressful. Not everybody was really happy to hear from contact tracers at that time, or maybe any time. So I did get to work from home, which was a plus. So it was, except for the training, it was all remote. It was very emotionally draining, which I guess I didn't expect that. And then at the end, when the pandemic started to die down, at least that first wave, then a lot of contact tracers were sent out into the field. So I was sent out to vaccination clinics. And this was at the very, very, very start of vaccination. And so it was extremely challenging there too, because people were trying to get in to get their vaccines, and there were, very strict protocols about who was eligible and who was not. So yes, we had to call in the police a few times. So that was really stressful. And at the same time, my mom was ill with cancer. And so I knew she was not going to be around for very much longer. And arranging for her care was, she was in Florida. Arranging for her care from California was, it was almost a full-time job. So I decided at that point, okay, I need to, it's time to get off this train and move on to the next. So I did take a few months off at that point, and my mom passed away shortly after that.
Quick interruption. If you are enjoying this podcast, please rate it and review it on whatever podcast player you are using. And more importantly, would you mind telling a friend? Thanks, and back to the podcast episode. I remember you dealing with doing this all remotely, and we had a number of members in community who lost family members during the pandemic, and I have no idea what it would be like, the fact that you're dealing with this and you can't go see her.
Yeah, and I was able to see her. She passed away in April. I was able to see her in January, but they had to bring her outside and we could visit for about half an hour. So it was really difficult. So But, at the same time, when I knew that I didn't want to stay in contact tracing or even for Department of Public Health, because at that time, and even now, it's extremely stressful. I felt like I wasn't really using my, all the skills that I have. I did want to get back to the garden with the kids. So while I was a contact tracer, I started the Master Gardener certification program where I live in San Bernardino County. And so that I felt like when I was going through that program, I had really found my tribe. And these are the people that, I really looked forward to going to those classes. And it was remote there too, which was the first time they had done that program remotely. But we did have some events and some projects that we did outside at that time. And I also started a project in my local community garden to build a compost system for the garden. So that's when I started. That's when I started getting into composting. And then through that program, I was able to connect with our director and the program coordinator for Master Gardeners and say, hey, when this program's over, it would be great if I could, work in the area and maybe even work in the program. And that's when I started doing my network. And they said, yeah, that sounds great. We have some funds coming up in July. And we'd love to have you come on board part-time. So I was kind of working on, what was going to be the next thing.
This is through the University of California?
Yes, University of California Cooperative Extension.
Gotcha. You go to work for them for what, 1 day a week, 2 days a week?
It was started out 8 hours a week.
Okay.
And now is up to 10 hours a week.
And what else was going on? You were composting, because one of the things that is interesting is you get involved in the composting in your community connected you with so many people.
Right. So getting involved with composting connected me with a lot of people within Master Gardeners and the Master Gardener program. Also, it connected me with the local composting community. And that was because our garden had received a grant from Cal Recycle, Community Composting for Green Spaces. And when we got that grant, we also had some staff from that program come in to help compost. The goal for our garden is to create an urban farm. And so there's 14 acres in the garden, and the soil is very poor. It's very hard. So, trying to make enough compost to convert that land to a farm. And so I started getting more and more involved in the composting community and the farming community. So, that's led to a lot of interesting connections. And it's a very small world here, or even nationally, that just like the same people keep popping up. And after I finished the Master Gardener program, there was a new farmer training program that I entered with another community garden. And so I started meeting even more people.
You're working 10 hours for University of California Cooperative Extension. Then you're also working where?
I knew that I wanted to get more hours somehow. So I was looking, I applied for a lot of different positions in the community, gardening, farming, and nothing was really working out. It was good to get that experience interviewing, but nothing was really coming from it. And then all of a sudden, when I was a food corps service member, I was in the high desert. I actually live in the low desert. And some of my fellow food corps service members worked for, or they served in the Upland school district, which is in the next town over from where I live now. And I knew that they had a farm to school program there. And I had read somewhere that they had just gotten a very large grant from the federal government. And so I thought, hey, maybe they could use some help over there. So I contacted the program manager, and this was back in, I think it was almost a year ago, like last May. And I said, oh, do you have any positions open? And at that time, I don't think they had received the funding. And so she told me that, well, something may be coming up, but we don't have anything right now. And so then, and I can't remember where I saw it. I saw an ad somewhere, or maybe it was mentioned to me by somebody else, that in November, that same group was actually looking for someone to be a farm to school program assistant. And so I immediately contacted the program manager, and I told her that I was interested. And I think I got my application in like the last possible day because I had just noticed it. And so I applied. And I was interviewed and I got the job. So I'm working as a program assistant for the Upland School District Farm to School program.
This is not an employee kind of job. What kind of job is it?
Yeah. So this one, my job with the Cooperative Extension is I'm actually an employee of the University of California. For this one, I'm a contractor for the school district. So that kind of opened up the whole new world of being a consultant. And so, I've actually formed a business and registered that in my city, kind of set up my business bank account so that I can do more jobs like this in the future. So that was a very interesting experience. And I think I actually prefer it that way, that I'm not, I'm on a contract and the contract is until June of 2023, but then I'm free to do something else or continue if they ask me to continue. And actually, I think I prefer working that way. So I'm working about 3 days a week for them, about 25 hours a week. So between the two positions, it equals a full-time position, which has been quite a shock. After spending the last when I was working in public health, I was working full-time plus and getting paid for those overtime hours. But then when I left there, I had been working either 0 or 10 hours a week. So, being back to almost full time. And it actually is, because I have two different positions, it actually feels like more than full time because I'm trying to get different things done in different positions. So.
Yeah, the two things I want people to notice is, number one, Debbie tried the public health side, and you discovered that working for a county public health department is pretty dysfunctional.
Yeah, at least this one was not. It wasn't what I had hoped it would be. There really was. It's because it was a temporary position,
right?
And an hourly position. There really was no possibility for growth there.
Yeah, you went and tried, just as those people who listened to Vicki Soul's interview a couple of weeks ago. She also tried a bunch of different things. They didn't work out. That was okay. You learn from each one. And two, Debbie now has started her own business. And I encourage everyone to at least to do the infrastructure. My Career Pivot is an LLC. The actual name of my business is Mark Miller Associates LLC, because I didn't know what the name was going to be at the beginning. But I set up that years ago. And I encourage everyone to go do that, whether you're going to actually start your own business or not. You at least have the tax ID. What are you doing in the schools?
All different kinds of things. It's actually a lot like what I was doing in food corps. And in fact, the district still has 2 food corps service members. So I help them quite a bit, and I can share my experience with them. But for instance, tomorrow we've got a farm to school field day at one of the elementary schools. So we have a lot of activities for the students, and so I'll be there helping to run those activities and also help to plan for that. On Wednesday, we've got a waste audit at the high school. So we're trying to figure out how the district, and in particular nutrition services, is going to handle all the food waste that's generated within the district. So we're doing that. Building gardens by the end of the year. The district will have a garden in every school in the district, and maintain those gardens, harvest those gardens, because things that are grown in the garden can be served in the cafeteria. And then running a lot of garden clubs for all different ages, from pre-kindergarten to 12th grade. It's a lot of fun. It's very varied. I don't sit in the office a lot. And in the first half of my life, I spent a lot of time sitting in front of a computer and in an office. And I'm really happy to get outside and not do that anymore.
So you found your happy place?
Yes, I found my happy place. And the interesting thing is that my 2 positions complement each other quite a bit, because in my cooperative extension position, I'm an environmental education coordinator. I work with the schools and the school gardens. So actually, I'm putting together, both these positions, and it's really interesting. And it's all the same people, in kind of this small gardening, farming, compost world. The only thing I have to figure out right now is how to not overwork myself, because it is something I'm passionate about. I do a lot of volunteer work as a master gardener in addition to my job. And so I have to find, some time for myself. And I haven't done that yet, since I just started this second part-time job in January.
So you're also now doing presentations for University of California Cooperative Extension. Tell us about what you're doing.
Yeah, so we actually have Master Gardeners have a speakers bureau. And so there's a group of us who do regular presentations. Back in the old days, it used to be in person at libraries and other places, at gardens and libraries. And now, it started to go back to in person, but during the pandemic, it was all Zoom. And so I've done quite a few presentations on composting and what to plant in the garden for various months, January, February, March, etc. And so I try to do at least one of those a month. And also, I recently spoke about composting in a workshop for an environmental education symposium. And I also encourage Cooperative Extension to post all those on YouTube. So I resurrected the YouTube channel for them. And we also have our presentations on the website too.
And we'll get the links to the YouTube channels and put it in the show notes. I think the interesting part of your story is you got into this composting world. As you say, it's a small world. As many of us, the worlds we live in are usually not that big. And you manage to connect the dots. And you never knew where the next dot would connect to, but you kept on going, okay, I'm gonna keep on doing this. And oh, yes. Oh, as you say, your two jobs function well together.
Yes. They build on each other and allow for, I guess, cooperation between all different kinds of organizations. So collaboration. Yeah. And I think that the one thing that I've learned over the last 5 or so years is to just follow my heart and follow my instincts and just keep, you don't know where the road is going, but you're just going to take the next step. And if it's not the right next step, then you go in a different direction. And I think that, while I was building my career in engineering, I wasn't really necessarily following my heart. It was more like climbing the corporate ladder, trying to build the retirement fund. But now I feel like I have the financial freedom to be able to just do what really makes me happy. And what I think, I want to actually give back to my community and serve my community. And that is really my mission.
So what's the next dot you want to connect to?
I don't know. I think that I'm fairly happy. I feel like I'm happy where I am. I think that, in the future, I'd like to use my consulting business to work for more clients, just do a variety of different things.
As you say, you've been taking one step forward and the next step forward, never knowing where the next step would take you. But you kept on stepping forward. And I suspect when your contract ends in 2023, there's going to be something else that you don't know what that is yet.
Right. So I feel like I don't want to know. Like right now, it's not important for me to know. Life is an adventure, but it is too short to spend time doing things that you don't like or want to do. I've reached that point in my life. And after my mom passed away, I just thought, I might not have, I may or I may not have that much time left. And I really have to make the most of it. So I'm just going to make the most of every moment and find out where it leads. One thing I'm doing right now is I started doing the Master Food Preserver certification class because I thought that would be a good complement to what I'm doing with Master Gardeners. So we'll see where that leads.
Well, Debbie, you're an inspiration.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, I think when we see you on every Thursday night with our What's Next group, you're always there, and I'm always fascinated what you're going to do next.
Me too. I never know what I'm going to do next either, but all I could say is, I kind of just look out there and say, what is a really cool thing to be doing? And that's the next thing I'm going to be doing. And I would like to add some travel to the mix. And I realize that the position I'm in is you do have to kind of be there in person. So that's it. I'm not doing that much remote work anymore, but I would like to add some travel and maybe get experience in some farms and gardens in other countries. I don't know. So
cool. So Debbie, this has been great. If someone wanted to reach and contact you, how could they do that?
Take a look at our UCCE San Bernardino YouTube channel and also at Ms. Debbie the Garden Lady YouTube channel.
And again, we'll put links to those in the show notes. So, Debbie, I said you're an inspiration, and I very much appreciate you in the community. And thank you very much for telling your story on the Repurpose Your Career podcast.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you too, and everything you've done with the Career Pivot community.
I hope you found Debbie's story inspiring. She continues to be an inspiration for community members as she continues to connect the dots. Debbie was not comfortable giving out her email address on this podcast, but if you would like to speak with her, email me at podcast@careerpivot.com, and I will put you in contact with her. Take a moment, go to careerpivot.com, sign up for the weekly Career Pivot Insights newsletter, which is sent out every Sunday. You will get a weekly update on this podcast, white papers, and new blog posts. While there, do not forget to check out the Career Pivot community, which can be found at careerpivot.com/community. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Look for Career Pivot on Facebook and LinkedIn. You'll also find me on Twitter at Career Pivot. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of the Repurpose Your Career podcast. You will find all the show notes at careerpivot.com/episode-262. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podbeam, Overcast, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, and lots of other places where podcasts can be found. In fact, this podcast can be found on the Repurpose Your Career podcast channel on YouTube. Hope to see you next Monday for another episode of Repurpose Your Career podcast.